I'm making the same mistakes over and over again. Do not think of taking that girl away from me because she's all I've got left.
Everyone here just wants to make some money.
I'm scared. It's all my mate.
The new series of The Responder starts Sunday the 5th of May on BBC One and iPlayer.
Now the BBC News at 1 o'clock with Jane Hill.
Today at 1, one of the most senior bosses at the Post Office apologises to victims of the Horizon IT scandal. Angela van den Boogaard tells the public inquiry she never knowingly did anything wrong.
I do want to say to everyone impacted by wrongful convictions and wrongful contract terminations that I am truly, truly sorry for the devastation caused to you, your family and friends.
Power sharing in Scotland collapses. The First Minister says the SNP's deal with the Green Party is over. The biggest rail overhaul in a generation. Labour says it'll renationalise most passenger services if it wins the general election. And history makers meet the British sailors who are the first all-female crew to win a round-the-world yacht race.
On BBC London, with just a week to go until Londoners vote for who they want to be mayor, we hear from all the main candidates who've taken part in a special BBC debate.
Hello and welcome to the BBC News at 1. She's been described as the Post Office executive who knew more about the Horizon IT scandal than anyone else. This morning, Angela van den Boogaard told the public inquiry that she was truly, truly sorry for the devastation caused to sub-postmasters and their families. She personally oversaw many of the complaints about problems with the computer system, and in 2019 was heavily criticised by a judge for giving misleading evidence during a High Court class action which Alan Bates and fellow sub-postmasters won. Zoe Conway sent this report from the inquiry.
It's the biggest day of the inquiry so far for sub-postmasters. Angela van den Boogaard, the woman they blame for causing so much of their suffering, is taking the stand.
It's a very big moment. Like I was double-minded. Shall I come? But I said no. It's too good to miss. Today, definitely, I would say like, please, please, please stop lying and tell the truth. We all know the truth, but just coming, make it more official. Need a proper truth now.
Why the cover-up? Why did you do what you did and put us in the position that you did put us in? We want to try and put her in that same position as well.
Angela van den Boogaard is said to have known more about the Horizon IT scandal than anyone else at the Post Office.
Saying sorry, I know, doesn't change what's happened, but I do want to say to everyone impacted by wrongful convictions and wrongful contract terminations that I am truly, truly sorry for the devastation caused to you, your family and friends.
But the inquiry wanted to know just what was she apologising for?
Firstly, I think you make no concessions or admissions that you did anything wrong, correct?
Well, I didn't knowingly do anything wrong, and I would never knowingly do anything wrong.
You don't apologise for your role in any of the events being examined by the inquiry, do you?
I think, and I've reflected on this quite a bit, and the disclosure that I've seen through this process. There are things that documents that I've seen that I don't remember some of them from the time, but clearly, knowing what I know now, I would give further weight to some of those documents than I did at the time.
Sub-postmasters finally began to see justice in 2019, when the Post Office was forced to admit in court that branch accounts could be accessed remotely by Fujitsu without the sub-postmasters' knowledge. The issue of remote access and Horizon software bugs were discussed as far back as 2010 at a meeting which Angela van den Boogaard was told about in an email.
Or was it that you and others within the Post Office studiously avoided lifting the lid on what had happened at the meeting of October 2010, when the receipts and payments mismatch bug was not only discovered, but also was revealed Fujitsu's ability to tamper with branch accounts?
I wasn't aware of this, and I wish I had been aware of this at the time, because that fundamentally changes what my understanding was to do with Horizon System. And even just the language used in here, clearly it was known.
What this inquiry has been doing is spending a lot of time focusing on this issue of remote access. What did Angela van den Bogaard know about it? When did she know it? And what Jason Beer, the lead counsel to the inquiry, has been doing is pulling up documents, emails, dated as far back as 2010, where remote access is discussed. And he's then comparing that with what Angela van den Bogaard was saying publicly. And he's even accused her of making false statements. Now, it's packed in the inquiry today. There are lots of sub-postmasters in the room, and I think it's fair to say they are hanging on her every word.
Zoe, thank you. Zoe Conway there at the public inquiry. Power sharing is over in Scotland. The Scottish National Party will now lead a minority government at Holyrood. The Scottish Greens were given the news before an emergency cabinet meeting in Edinburgh this morning. Last week, the party had announced that its membership would be given a vote about remaining in government because of anger about the decision to scrap key climate targets. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon has this report.
If a sign was needed, a split was on the cards. This was it.
Is the agreement with the SNP over?
The co-leaders of the Scottish Greens leaving before the cabinet they were part of was due to meet. The junior partners in government had been threatening to jump. The First Minister got in first.
Good morning, everyone.
The power-sharing agreement between Scotland's two biggest pro-independence parties terminated with immediate effect.
I've believed that the benefits have outweighed the compromises. When I said that the agreement was worth its weight in gold, I meant it. However, it is now my judgment that the balance has shifted. The Bute House Agreement was intended to provide stability to the Scottish Government, and it has made possible a number of achievements, but it has served its purpose.
But for the Scottish Greens, this was an acrimonious political parting of the ways. Angered by the Scottish Government's decision last week to water down key climate change commitments and the NHS's announcement it would pause prescribing puberty blockers to children.
The First Minister has decided, I'm sorry to say, to capitulate to the most reactionary, backward-looking forces within the SNP, and it's the opposite of what's in Scotland's best interests.
It had started so well. The Bute House Agreement, described by the then First Minister Nicola Sturgeon as a leap of faith. Alongside her, the first Greens in government anywhere in the UK. But there had been growing criticism the SNP had prioritised controversial policies like the Gender Recognition Reform Act, in part to keep the smaller party on board, and had been paying the price in the polls.
I think the First Minister might be a bit tetchy today. I wonder why.
At First Minister's questions under pressure from political opponents.
He has abandoned the platform he stood on. He claims it's now a new beginning. But really, it's the beginning of the end. Isn't Humza Yousaf a lame duck First Minister?
Governing alone, the SNP will have greater freedom for making policy. But compromises will be needed to get those policies through Parliament, and that could prove tough.
And Lorna is live in Edinburgh, and there's now been a call, Lorna, for a no-confidence vote in the leader of the SNP.
Yeah, Jane, Humza Yousaf says this is all about providing stability going forward. He will hope to be seen as decisive, being on the front foot, seizing the political initiative. But, you know, remember just 48 hours ago, he was backing the SNP Scottish Greens power-sharing deal. Now he's binning it. The Scottish Conservative says that this shows he's weak, that this was a coalition of chaos. They are calling for this vote of no confidence. Scottish Labour say they have no confidence in Humza Yousaf. Youssef, that there needs to be an election now. The Liberal Democrats are saying there needs to end this entire government. And remember, the SNP have 63 seats in the Scottish Parliament. The other parties have 66. They do not have a majority. So if he is to survive a no confidence vote, which if it does go ahead, which seems likely, it will happen in all likelihood next week. He will need the votes of people from some of the other political parties and even his former erstwhile partners in this coalition, the Scottish Greens, when asked what they would do going forward, say that they cannot rely on Green votes in the Parliament. Asked directly if they'll back the SNP, they said, we'll see, watch and listen. Jane.
Lorna, thank you. Lorna Gordon. A police investigation is continuing after 2 teachers and a pupil were stabbed at a secondary school in southwest Wales yesterday. The 3 have now been discharged from hospital. The BBC has been told that one of the injured is the head of Year 7, Fiona Elias. The school in Carmarthenshire went into lockdown for about 4 hours yesterday. A teenage girl remains in police custody on suspicion of attempted murder. 2 household cavalry horses are in a serious condition after they threw off their riders and raced through London yesterday. 3 soldiers and a cyclist were taken to hospital following the incident. Our correspondent Francis Reid has joined me because, Francis, we have had an update about all of this today.
Yes, we have. We've just had an update in saying that 2 horses, as you said, are still in a serious condition. The British Army says that 7 were spooked in central London yesterday after building materials were dropped from a great height right next to them. They were taking part in a rehearsal near Buckingham Palace for today's Major General's inspection. The Household Cavalry, of course, is one of the most senior regiments in the British Army. But the riders were thrown off and 4 of the horses broke free. Apparently their names are Vida, Trojan, Quaker and Tennyson. And during a several-mile route through the city, the animals collided with vehicles. We saw that, didn't we, with the double-decker bus and a taxi. The Army says 2 of the injured horses were operated on last night. It's Quaker that has now been transferred to an equine hospital. And the Army went on to reassure the public that the horses received the highest standards of care. Now, 3 soldiers and a member of the public also needed hospital treatment. Their injuries are not said to be serious. The soldiers are expected to return to duties. But to put this into context, 150 animals per day are on exercise in the city, and they deal with big events like the King's coronation. So this was very, very rare indeed.
All right, Francis, thank you. Francis Reid. Labour says it will renationalise most passenger rail services if it wins the next general election. The party says its proposals, which include creating a new publicly owned body which would be responsible for infrastructure, would be the industry's biggest overhaul in a generation. The government says the plans are pointless and unfunded. More details from our transport correspondent Katie Austin.
What's the way ahead for Britain's railway? Today, Labour outlined what it would do, arguing its plans would fix a broken model.
Our railways have become a symbol of national decline, of a country that no longer works and a government with no plan to fix it. Cancellations are at record highs. Fares have risen almost twice as fast as wages since 2010, and strikes are costing us £25 million a day.
When contracts held by private train companies expire, they would be brought into a new public body, Great British Railways, which would oversee both infrastructure and train services. But Labour would not nationalise freight or rolling stock companies, and private operators like Lumo and Hull Trains, which run independently without government subsidy, could continue. Other measures include automatic delay repay, digital season tickets, and a best price guarantee, making fares more transparent, although not necessarily cheaper. Labour claims its new model would mean cost savings for the taxpayer. The Transport Secretary disagrees.
They've got no idea how to pay for it. There are going to be increased costs. If you nationalise all those companies, you're going to have to hire civil servants to manage it. They're setting up another quango.
The Lib Dems want to freeze fares but haven't committed to nationalisation. The SNP said it would work with Labour. Scotland and Wales already have nationalised passenger rail services, and several large England-based operators are publicly run after being brought into the government's operator of last resort. Also, the government has a large degree of control over most private train companies because of the type of contracts they're currently on. A group which speaks for private train companies says a structure like the one used by Transport for London would be better.
That alternative model gives you the best of both worlds. So greater public control through a governing body in the public sector like Great British Railways, but then harnessing that commercial expertise of the private sector train company to deliver better outcomes for the passenger.
Even if it does gain power, Labour admits it would take time for passengers to see change. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Well, let's talk to our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman. Is this a clear policy divide, this idea, between Labour and the Conservatives?
It certainly is, yes. I think by anyone's lights, what Labour are proposing here is a serious, significant change to how the railways work. Yes, they're just talking about renationalising the operating companies rather than the rolling stock companies or freight. But nevertheless, they're being vocally criticised for that by the Conservatives. They say what matters when it comes to the railways is reliability and affordability, and they argue that Labour's plans won't do anything to affect those measures. I think it's worth also just reflecting on this in terms of the politics within the Labour Party rather than between Labour and the Conservatives, because despite Labour's thumping great lead in the opinion polls, there are some in Sir Keir Starmer's party who say that his offer isn't different enough from the Conservatives, that he doesn't have enough bold, ambitious policies. Well, those people who make that criticism are very happy with this today. So a big offer from Keir Starmer, but also a big divide between Labour and the Conservatives as we approach that general election.
All right, thanks for now, Henry Zeffman. The National Crime Agency says it's made another arrest in connection with the death of 5 people on a Channel small boat on Tuesday. It said it had arrested an 18-year-old Sudanese citizen yesterday. One of the 3 people arrested on Tuesday has been released without charge. The other 2 remain in custody. The boat was carrying 112 people when a deadly crush happened. Donald Trump will be in court in New York again later as his trial continues for allegedly falsifying business records. Also today, the US Supreme Court is due to decide whether the former president has immunity from criminal prosecution for actions taken while in office, after he was charged in connection with attempts to overturn the result of the 2020 election. Well, we'll talk more about that in a moment with Gary O'Donoghue. First, though, let's head to New York. Our correspondent Neda Tawfiq is following that trial there. And what are we expecting again today, Neda?
Yeah, well, Jane, Donald Trump is due back in court shortly, but first he began the day with a visit to a construction site to speak with construction and union workers. Donald Trump's campaign says since he can't be out on the trail, they are bringing it to them here in New York. And the former president is certainly taking advantage of the media spotlight, even nicknaming this trial the Biden trial, even though it is a state case that has no connection to the Department of Justice in D.C. Now, the jury is still out on whether this unprecedented trial and the attention that comes with it will help or hurt him politically, but his lawyers are having a rough go of it. Today, we might learn if Trump will be held in contempt of court. His lawyers argued he wasn't violating a gag order, and the social media posts in question were a response to political attacks. But that didn't land well with the judge, who said they were losing all credibility with the court. And the first witness, David Pecker, the publisher of the National Enquirer, he's back on the stand. So far, he's helped lay the groundwork of this case for prosecutors, detailing how his tabloid was a powerful tool for Trump's campaign. He could today begin giving evidence, though, on the central piece of this case, that hush money payment to Stormy Daniels. Donald Trump says he is innocent, and his lawyers will have a chance to question David Pecker after prosecutors.
All right, thanks, Neda. Well, let's speak to Gary O'Donoghue as well, of course. At the Supreme Court, a significant day there, Gary?
Yeah, a very significant day. I mean, bear in mind, this relates to perhaps the most serious of the 4 criminal cases that Donald Trump is facing, that of trying to overturn the election in 2020. He's facing 4 counts on those charges. And this really is a hearing to say, where his lawyers will argue, look, a president can't be criminally prosecuted for something they did while they were in office. They can't be held accountable in that way. And I think the reason it's important is not because of just because of this case, because it would also then undermine all those other cases, the documents case in Florida, where he's accused of breaches of the Espionage Act and of obstruction, etc. It would also affect election cases in Georgia, for example. Even though it's a state-level case, if the Supreme Court says, OK, blanket immunity, all those things would fall away. Now, I think a lot of legal scholars believe that going along with the idea of blanket immunity is unlikely, but it will delay things significantly in this trial and could delay this January the 6th trial till after the election. And if Donald Trump becomes president, then he can simply make that go away.
All right, Gary, thank you. Gary O'Donoghue. Here, the government has rejected calls to scrap one-word inspection judgments for schools in England, such as outstanding or inadequate. They say the categories give parents an important summary of a school's performance. Teaching unions and some MPs had demanded a change after the death of the head teacher Ruth Perry, who took her own life after her primary school was downgraded by Ofsted in late 2022. Here's our education editor, Branwen Jeffries.
An inspection at this small primary started this debate. The single-word judgment, inadequate, haunted the head teacher. Ruth Perry took her own life knowing the school would be downgraded. A coroner found the inspection had contributed. Ruth's sister, Julia Waters, has campaigned for single-word judgments to go. MPs agreed after an inquiry, but the government says the system should stay.
I'm deeply upset, more than a little bit angry, that after all that time, all that commitment, all that talking, all that apparent listening, they're not going to act. They are not going to do the things that they know my family and so many others need and want to change.
Head Teachers Union said the government was failing to listen and concerns remained about the system.
If we have another tragedy, that will sit firmly on the shoulders of ministers who are failing to grapple with this problem right now. We have calls from members regularly on our helpline in crisis because of inspection, and we know we are so very close to that happening again. It's not scaremongering. We've seen it happen once. We cannot afford to see it happen again.
The new head of Ofsted says he wants to consult widely. The Labour Party have already said they would scrap the one-word judgments. Branwen Jeffries, BBC News.
The UK's first memorial for lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender armed forces personnel is to be built at the National Memoriam Arboretum in Staffordshire. The government has put £350,000 towards the project, which was one of the recommendations of an independent review into the historical treatment of people who were sacked or forced out of the military for being gay. It was illegal to be gay in the British Armed Forces until 2000. England has the highest rate of alcohol use by school children out of more than 40 countries. That's according to a new report commissioned by the World Health Organization. It examined data from 280,000 children aged 11 to 15, which showed that by the age of 13, 57% of girls in England had drunk alcohol and half of boys. The study also found that girls are more likely to smoke. More than a quarter of 15-year-old girls in England have smoked a cigarette in their lifetime, compared to 16% of boys. And it says 2 out of 5 girls in England and Scotland have vaped by the age of 15, which is higher than countries including France, Germany and Spain. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes has all the details.
Vaping among UK teenagers has soared in the last few years. In 2013, it was fewer than 1% of 11 to 17-year-olds. A decade later, it was nearly 8%. There are now more vapers than smokers, a trend confirmed by the World Health Organization survey. The government has already introduced measures to clamp down on the promotion and illegal sale of vapes to under 18s.
We've seen the effect of recent legislation and policy, the positive impact that that's had, and that's important. But we also need to be addressing this, I think, at the level of family and communities.
But the data on teenage drinking will also be a concern. At the age of 11, more than a third of boys and girls in England say they have drunk alcohol. By the age of 13, more than half have done so. both of these figures are higher than any of the other countries in the study. And compared with other European countries, rates of drunkenness in the UK were high, particularly among girls.
And we've talked about the particular increased, or not increased use, but higher use of alcohol in a problematic way, as well as vaping by young girls more than boys. And we think influencers may be playing more of a part of that. So the more that can be done in that space as well, the better.
Health experts say while drinking among young people is in decline overall, the UK remains one of the heaviest drinking nations in the world, and point out the earlier a child drinks, the more likely it is they will develop problems with alcohol later in life. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
The number of shoplifting offences recorded by police in England and Wales has risen to the highest level in 20 years. More than 430,000 offences were logged by forces last year, up more than a third on the year before. Our Home Affairs correspondent Daniel Samford is with me. Do we know why this increase, Daniel?
Yeah, another new record, 37% increase in a single year in what's been called an epidemic of shoplifting by some retailers. What's behind it is probably a bit complicated. It might be partly to do with the cost of living crisis, might be partly to do with under-policing, it might partly to do with self-checkouts and the low risk that people feel that they have of being caught. But one of the major factors seems to be organised criminal element, that drug users and others are being persuaded by organised criminals to go in and steal large numbers of low-value items that can be sold easily on the black market, things like chocolate bars, baby formula, things like that. And it seems to have been something that's just grown up as a trend really quite quickly in a couple of years since the pandemic. What are retailers doing about it? Well, they're working with police in something called Project Pegasus to try and share intelligence, but also they're having to do things like putting tags, electronic tags, on very mundane things like eggs, butter and chocolate bars.
All right, Daniel, thank you. Daniel Samford there. Venice has become the first city in the world to introduce an entry ticket for people visiting for the day. It's hoped the €5 pass will help ease the pressures of mass tourism. Our correspondent Mark Lowen joins us this lunchtime from Venice. Tell us more, Mark.
Thanks very much, Jane. Yes, hello from Venice. Gorgeous as ever, unique and creaking under the weight of mass tourism. Around 30 million visitors come to Venice every year, but about 2/3 of them are day trippers, all coming to the same sites at the same times. So this is one of the schemes now to try to tackle that problem. A €5 entry fee that is going to be checked in places like this around the city centre. We're outside the train station here. Now, you're exempt from the €5 if you are a resident, if you are staying overnight, if you are a young person or a student, but if you have to pay the €5 fee, then you get a QR code, you pay online, and your QR code is then scanned at places like this around the city. Now, the city authorities say that this is an experiment in place until the end of July and that they will see whether or not to extend it in price and duration if it works. Critics say that this will do nothing to address Venice's fundamental problems, which are a dwindling local population and the rising sea levels from climate change. Now, of course, other cities right across the world, many of them in Europe, also suffering from similar over-tourism pressures, will be watching closely to see whether or not this does indeed work.
Thanks, Mark. Mark Lowen there in Venice. Now, it was a voyage like no other. A team of British sailors has made history by becoming the first all-female crew to win an around-the-world yacht race. The Maiden set sail from the Isle of Wight in September and spent 7 months at sea. After a nervous wait, they were awarded the gold for the race, and today they've been talking about their victory. Here's Ellie Price.
Even Tower Bridge looked like it was saluting them before they left last summer. Now, after 153 days and 28,500 nautical miles, Maiden and her 12-woman crew have come home. And they only went and did it. The first time an all-women crew have won a round-the-world yacht race. And the skipper, Heather Thomas, did it all by navigating the old-fashioned way, as race rules meant no modern technology was allowed.
So you have a really in-depth understanding of the sun, the moon, the planets and the stars and the weather around you. So it's quite a pure way of sailing.
The yacht took part in a parade of sail on Saturday, so was joined by a flotilla of other boats to cheer her on as she came into Southampton. Maiden knew the routine well. She enjoyed the same homecoming way back in 1990 when she finished another round-the-world race. That time she was skippered by Tracy Edwards, the first time an all-women crew had taken part in the challenge.
People say, is it a bit weird not being on the boat? It's actually not, because I look at this amazing crew and I look at them sailing my boat and it feels very right. So the whole thing has just been amazing.
Divided into 4 legs, the 14 yachts in this race stopped at Cape Town, Auckland and Punta del Este before heading back to the Isle of Wight. And if that wasn't hard enough, Maiden had just spent 6 years touring the world, spreading the word about education for girls. The Duchess of York, Sarah Ferguson, has been involved in the Maiden project for several decades too.
It doesn't matter, no race, creed, colour or any denomination, no judgment. We are united to make a planet better for the youth of today, and that is Maiden.
The yacht arrived back safely more than a week ago, but because of the complicated handicap system and waiting for other competitors to return, the crew only just found out they had won.
I'm very happy. It's a little bit surreal at the moment, just coming off the boat with no technology to quite a lot of media attention is quite surreal. We hope that it will inspire the next generation of sailors, but also the next generation of women to dream big and work hard to achieve those goals.
So the celebrations won't be over anytime soon. Ellie Price, BBC News.
Oh, congratulations to them. That takes us to a look at the weather prospects. Chris Falk.
Hi Jane, well our weather is going to stay on the chilly side for the next few days, and a mark of just how cold the air is today. We've seen a few flakes of snow across some of the highest hills of northern England and Scotland. Now, the satellite picture shows an area of low pressure swirling away in the North Sea. Patches of cloud and rain for England and Wales, but brighter skies for Scotland, where yes, there'll be a few passing showers, but if you want the sunshine, this is the place to be. And those brighter skies are set to work into northern England and Northern Ireland as we go on through the afternoon, staying quite cloudy with rain at times for Wales, Midlands, East Anglia and southern counties of England. Wherever you are, temperatures well below average. We're looking at about 9 to 13 degrees. There'll be some parts of eastern England probably see temperatures no higher than around 7 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Now, overnight tonight, we'll still see a few patches of rain coming and going across southernmost areas of England, perhaps South Wales. Otherwise, the sky's clear, particularly across northwestern areas of the country, with some frost developing in the countryside. So once again, we're looking at another cold start to the day on Friday. Despite those low temperatures, though, it should be quite a bit of sunshine first thing. Showers will be quite widespread through the day across northern eastern Scotland, eastern areas of England. Still the threat of some patches of rain across the south, particularly the southwest. Temperatures not really changing too much. It will be another chilly day for the time of year. Average in London in April is 15. We're only looking at 13 at best. Now on into the weekend, low pressure is set to move up from the south, and this will be bringing a spell of rain. Now on Saturday, the wettest weather is going to be across southern areas of England, across the Midlands, East Anglia and perhaps southern parts of Wales as well. There'll be a chilly northeasterly wind developing through the day for these areas, making it feel quite cold. Scotland, Northern Ireland, Northern England, brighter weather with sunshine and a few showers. Those showers could have some hail and thunder mixed in with them. Temperatures about 10 to 12 degrees Celsius at best. Second half of the weekend, the same area of low pressure bringing rain to some eastern areas. Now, this band of rain could be very slow to clear, so it could be that some eastern areas keep the rain for a good chunk of the day. There's a bit of uncertainty about that. But for western areas of the country and for Scotland too, it looks like the weather should be brighter with, again, sunshine and showers, but it will continue to feel cold. Now, if you're fed up with this chilly spell of weather, it looks like things will get a little bit warmer into next week, but I won't be reaching for my bikini just yet because it does look like it's going to be quite unsettled with rain or showers around. But at least those temperatures will be climbing back or a bit above average for the time of year. Jane.
Chris, thank you very much. I'll hold that thought. Thank you. And that is the BBC News at 1 for today. Now it's time for the latest wherever you are. Have a very good afternoon. Bye from us.
Welcome to BBC London. I'm Victoria Hollins. Two of the military horses that ran loose through central London yesterday